Live now to the LMP member, former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Andrew Wallace, who joins us. And give us a sense of the situation in your neck of the woods, Andrew, in the wake of ex-tropical cyclone Alfred.
Well, it's kind of a story of two cities at the moment, Kieran. The west of the highway received, where I live, 460 millimetres in 24 hours, and east of the highway received very little rain yesterday. So we're cleaning up west of the highway, and the east of the highway are wondering what all the fuss is about.
Do you think that on the Sunshine Coast that there was a reprieve of sorts? That obviously we spoke last week, there was a lot of concern that things could have got really bad. I know in certain parts of the state that still the recovery is going to be much greater, but I think a sense of relief for many, Andrew.
Yeah, look, absolutely, Kieran. I think no matter where you are on the Sunshine Coast, we know that it could have been a whole lot worse. There's been some minor flooding in places where I'm at the moment, in a little town called Eudlo, also Palmwoods and Woombai. But minor flooding, not as bad as what they copped down south, down the Gold Coast and south of the border. But certainly west of the highway in the Sunshine Coast hinterland, we received an absolute bucketing yesterday.
On a few other matters, if I can, I know you're in your high vis, but a few other issues around we're going to talk about. One, Peter Dutton accused of not getting a federal police briefing about that caravan. Well, it was a plot. Now it looks like it was just a criminal organised crime effort to try and reduce a sentence. Should he have got the briefing at the time to try and dial things down a bit?
Well, Kieran, this is an absolute smokescreen from an absolute failure of a Home Affairs Minister. Tony Burke is trying to, use a lot of smoke and mirrors to try and avert attention away from Labor's failures in relation to anti-Semitism. If you spoke to any Jewish Australian today and asked them whether they felt safe in the Australian community, they would say no. And the reason they say no is because, look, it really doesn't make a lot of difference whether the organised crime gangs are taking part in these firebombings or whether it's some neo-Nazi group. The reality is that it's happening on the ground and it is terrorising Jewish Australians. It's totally unacceptable. The Prime Minister needs to stand up and answer the question as to when he found out, when he was briefed about this incident, about the caravan incident, because he called it a terrorist event. He called it that. He's called it a potential mass casualty event. So if he was receiving briefings from the AFP, when that Tony Burke is now saying that the Leader of the Opposition should have, well, clearly the briefings that the Prime Minister was getting were wrong. Either that or he's misleading the Parliament, or the public, I should say. The reality is that Peter Dutton's office, the office of the Leader of the Opposition, was briefed, as was James Patterson, the Shadow Home Affairs Minister. I called for a briefing from AFP and ASIO to the PJCIS. So the opposition was receiving the briefings, absolutely. This is a smokescreen on the part of Tony Burke, a failed one at that.
Given that the federal police are saying it was a criminal con job, and since they've said really targeted the organised crime element of this, have we seen a reduction in some of the anti-Semitic graffiti and so on? Has that had an impact, given what the federal police and the authorities are saying has been driven in part by organised crime figures, this spate of anti-Semitism?
Well, Kieran, your point goes to the very point that the Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton, and myself, James Patterson, all members of the opposition have been saying that if Anthony Albanese, as Prime Minister, had stood up and condemned soundly the actions of some on the steps of Sydney Opera House just a couple of days after October 7, if the Prime Minister had instructed the AFP, if the Prime Minister had got the law enforcement agencies together and said this cannot be allowed to continue, I want you to crack down on this. If you had said that and the police had have gone out and started arresting people after October 7th in Australia, then the proof is in the pudding. When people start getting arrested and start getting locked up for this sort of stuff, this goes to our very point that the offending conduct significantly decreases. Now, if we had seen that leadership from the Prime Minister way back then, things would look very, very different in Australia, and the Jewish community in Australia would not be feeling so aggrieved and so attacked and so much under pressure. It's those failures of the Prime Minister. It's those failures of the then Home Affairs Minister and Tony Burke today that absolutely demonstrate your point.
Authorised by Andrew Wallace, LNP, Boccarina, Queensland.